Welcome to the Platform Analytics Academy session for November. I have that date wrong. It is actually November 16th. Just checking, make sure that everybody's awake. Tara saw it as soon as she came in. It's all good. I can't hear you, Tara, if you're talking too. So
Oops.
that's all right. Now I got you. So we're going to do things a little bit differently today. We're actually going to have we have content obviously to share, and I will share all of that with some screenshots and some bullets and things like that. But we thought that this one may be one that may be better to have a discussion around. Anytime that you talk about tuning, we did tuning and reporting last year around this same time. And then we thought about doing, the performance analytics one this time, but we thought it might be better to have a conversation. So we have quite a few slides to go through, and Dan and Tara and myself and Adam may join here shortly, and we may have some other panelists that show up as well, is to just have conversations. Because again, when it comes to tuning, there are definitely things that we want and we recommend that you do, but a lot of times it kind of just comes with experience of sort of what we've been through to kind of give you advice on things like that. So again, we are on camera today. So if you've never seen the three of us other than a picture, how are you? It's I wish we could see everybody else, but who knows how that works. But again, so let's go ahead and get started. So again, as usual, this is always for you. Especially today, we'll try to bring you some ideas that maybe that you never heard of, some that you probably have heard of, and some that you're actually doing, and we really appreciate that as well. But to give you some understanding and practical guidance, it is being recorded as usual. It will be out on the community page later on this afternoon, as well as on our YouTube page this afternoon as well. And Q&A, we still will utilize the Q&A. So if you have questions as we're talking about something, please make sure that you're utilizing the Q&A rather than the chat. Some things come through chat, but if we can get them all in the Q&A, it'd be better. And if it is a situation where we need to unmute you and let you talk, we're open to that as well. So I always want to make sure that we have this safe harbor. I don't know that we'll talk about anything necessarily that relates to this, but in case there is something that we do talk about, please make sure that you don't make any buying decisions or anything that we have discussed or discussing today. So again, my name is Thomas Davis, and I have Tara and Dan as well. Like I said, Adam may be here. And again, there may be some other panelists. I don't see them as of yet, but this is who will be on the call today. So again, today we want to talk about tuning solutions, and maybe I should move this over a little bit. Tuning solutions and performance analytics. And, this is something that hopefully you're already thinking about. Hopefully you're already doing some things that maybe you've had a conversation about, or maybe there's already been another community article or blog that's about it, or maybe you've even been on another platform analytics call or a session that we've had where we've talked about similar things like this. But this is something that you should always be thinking about. Anytime that obviously you're doing anything with data, you should definitely be thinking about these types of things to make things run more efficiently for whoever's viewing the things that you're doing inside of your platform. So there we go. So nobody wants this. Obviously, this is not something that you see inside of ServiceNow. It doesn't look like this. You may see a circle, but this is something that is irritating no matter what you're in. It doesn't matter if you're inside of our platform or anything else. We have become a generation of people that want it instantly. So the more we can do that and give that to you at your fingertips as soon as possible, that's what we want to try to do. So some things, real high level here of some things that we'll kind of talk about some of these or most of these things today, but just there's not enough room on this particular slide of all the different tuning concerns that possibly are out there. But we try to make sure that we are given some very high levels. The very first one, which we think is most important, which you see in green, is indexes, right? So if there's an opportunity to create an index, you should definitely do that. There's a lot of indexes that we have already thought of in ServiceNow that are already created out of the box. If it's a reference field, there's already been an index that's been created on that. But again, there are certain situations where maybe additional indexes need to be created. So definitely always be thinking about that as much as you can when you get into your data. Has this been done? And because indexes require an admin, you might want to get with your admin to actually talk about what is out there, especially if you're seeing something that is that you find to be slow, and it's just a question that you should ask somebody. Hey, is there an index on this particular field, or something of that nature? So
well, and I want to chime in there really quick. So also remember, the inverse can be having too many indexes basically equals no indexes, right? So if you try to index everything, then you've actually hosed yourself. So you got to really think about what you're looking to pull, what's your top priority, and who understands the data maybe a little bit better than you do, the way it's structured, how things are related to each other. So really sit down and have these conversations with your admin team to make sure that everybody's on the same page. Because if you just submit a request for an index, not understanding what already exists out there, you might actually hose yourself even more, because too many indexes, like I said, actually equals no indexes. So something to think about when you're playing around with indexes. Always, if you're creating a new table or a database view, that's the first question you want to ask is, do I have the proper fields indexed? And who can I ask about that? Who can I work with to get that structured? I mean, that's the number one thing you want to come out the gate with when working with tables and views.
Yeah, absolutely. Great point. Dan, you had something?
Yeah, I want to add another. I want to add a similar point to that too. So, because we're talking about indexes, what you have what you as a user, let's say if you're building a report or a PA widget or an indicator source, the stuff you can actually do as a PA admin or PA power user, what you have control over is also how you use those indexed fields in your query conditions. So definitely make sure that that's we're talking about indexing, we're talking about leveraging those in your actual conditions, so your fields that you're including in your database conditions or in your query conditions, as much as possible, make sure that those are fields that are indexed on your table. That could also really help speed things up.
Right.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about indexes a little bit more, and actually show some different thought processes on why indexes are important and why you should be doing that. But this slide here is really just a high level of some things that you should think about. And, always be thinking about the total number of records on a table. If you have a table that millions or possibly even billions of records that are in that, how are you going to query that? How are you going to be able to, as the next one says, the number of records that match conditions? Are you going to be able to put conditions in there to make it a little bit more granular, so you're not, returning that many records at one particular time? Because obviously the amount of records that are coming back obviously will, go right over to how often or how fast something is going to run. So always be thinking about how many records are inside of a table. And conditions, if you can create a condition or a filter at any level that would reduce that, then you should always be thinking about those as well. And then the other thing too is, the periods. I'm sorry, you had something, Tara?
No, I was just going to say, it seems like it's a no-brainer, filtering using filters, using conditions, which conditions are basically filters. It seems like it's a no-brainer, but you wouldn't believe the amount of times that people set out to write a quick query because they just want to see what's in the table and they don't apply any filters or conditions, and that'll literally sink your ship. So it might seem like something elementary, but is easy thing to overlook. I've done it myself, being like, oh, I just want to see what's in this table really quick, and I don't think about pulling like maybe the last week, or just so I can see what data is in the fields and what I'm working with. Where is there noise? That's a good way to also fine tune your queries and apply filters and condition is determining what noise is, and noise is any data that's in there that's garbage, that is something that needs to be overlooked. It needs to be filtered out. And the best way to do that is to write a quick query against a table, making sure you're pulling, maybe the last 2 weeks or something along those lines. But just not applying any sort of filter will definitely sink your ship. So always think about what can I apply to that? And then also, how can I filter out that noise? Because noise is definitely something that'll hose people, right? We always say garbage in, garbage out, but you have to filter out the garbage. At the end of the day, nobody has a pristine database, unfortunately.
Good comment in the Q&A from Phil. And actually, I meant to actually mention this as well. If you have your own ideas too in these topic areas, absolutely, please do share them. Phil's comment is they could also use table. I assume you meant table stats table stats to get parameters on your tables. So, you can actually determine where you've got, where, because a basic user is not going to know, how complex a table is necessarily off the top of their head. So that's also, I think that's a good pointer. Thank you, Phil.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely.
And a couple of other things real quick, and then we'll get to the next one is if you're using a database view, what tables are actually being accessed in that database view and how big are they, right? Who has, is it going to return? Is it going to look at two tables that, again, have millions of records? And, can you apply, filtering conditions on the tables inside of the database view and things like that. So again, database views are something that an admin has to do. So that's a conversation that you may want to have with your admin, unless you are the actual admin. And then lastly, the query load. Are you optimizing your queries as much as possible? Go ahead, Tara.
Well, also we're going to cover this in a little bit more detail, but we talk about query load. We're talking about a lot of times indicator sources or how many reports you hit having the same table. What you want to do is minimize how many of the same exact queries you're running to hit that. And we'll talk about it a lot more when we get into sources and how to fine tune and optimize your sources. But think about that, because oftentimes I've seen when I've gone to sit with a customer that they have the exact same query hitting the exact same table as their actual indicator, almost like their indicator sources and their indicators match. And so when you're hitting and querying the table that many times with the same query, you're putting an impact on your performance. And so that's something to always think about, is where can I reuse queries and optimize them so that they can be reused using indicators instead of hitting, especially with reports too, right? We got to think about that, because so many people will hit the same table with the same query for a report, hundreds of, if not thousands of times a day.
Yeah, and it's a great point. And it also kind of goes into something that we talk about a lot as well, right? Is governance. If you know that you have a particular indicator source that is giving you exactly what you need, then, why not hit that instead of creating the same exact indicator source again? So really good point. So let's see what we got.
I did, and one other, guess kind of fundamental on this too, because I think we're kind of talking at a level where I think we're just kind of assuming that everyone knows that we're talking about the difference between like reports versus a PA an indicator type of query. So just to clarify, for those, just to make sure we got at least a basic baseline, there are definitely different concerns when we're talking about loading a real-time report that's a table query on your dashboard versus putting a PA indicator on your dashboard. There's concerns for the PA indicators that we'll talk about here, and some of these have to do with that, but most of these have more to do with the reports as they load on your dashboard, and then from a PA perspective, it's when the collection jobs are running themselves. So it's that overnight time when the collection jobs are running. We're talking about PA. But when we're talking about the real-time load of the dashboard, we're just talking about the reports that are querying your active transactional tables.
Yeah. And that's a great point. And like I said, last November, we actually did this same thing, and it was directly about reports like you were talking about, Dan. And I'll make sure that link is in the community. So if you weren't able to get to that one and you have a lot more questions about the reporting side of it, you can definitely watch that one. That was a really good one as well.
Just as an example of that, the total number of records in a source table, if we're talking about PA, it doesn't matter at all in the dashboard. It matters a lot for the running of the data collection, the overnight data collection to get your scores. But when you're actually loading the widget for a PA indicator on your dashboard, the total number of records in the indicator source table makes zero difference. Because it's all coming out of the PA scores table at that time.
Yeah, great point. All right, so let's see. All right, so we've already had some really great conversation already, but our idea today is we want to talk about sources, both indicator and breakdown, and some things that you can do there, some tips. Look at the indicator level. What can you do there? And the widgets. Loading on dashboards. How many should you have displayed? How many should load automatically? Which is something that I've seen plenty of questions on the community about and had plenty of conversations about that. And then database views and database indexes. We talked a little bit about that, but we'll kind of show some stuff there. And then filtering conditions. You know, are you utilizing them as much as you possibly can? And then utilizing scripts. We'll talk a little bit about that as well. So with that, so let's talk about an indicator source here real quick. So if you don't know what an indicator source is, so indicator sources are data sets consisting of filtered records from one table or a database view. So what do we want our indicators to report on, or have the data have, to then use it inside of a widget? So we start it at the indicator source level. And a couple of the things that we always try to tell people to think about, or customers to think about when they're creating the indicator source, and Tara already alluded to it. One of the things is, first of all, go check and see if there's already one out there, right? If it's the same exact thing that you're going to do, go out there and look. And that's why I've always been a real stickler about descriptions. Like if there's a description field, no matter where you're at inside of the platform, and you can create a description, you should help your fellow workers out and put that there. So again, if there's one out there and somebody's created a description and you say to yourself, that's the exact same one that I need, why not use that? Usually the owner is there as well. So if you need to reach out to them, you can definitely do that. Say, hey, are you cool with me using it or whatnot? But definitely search and take a look. You had something, Tara?
Well, I was going to say that's a really good point, because we should be pushing that on almost every single slide that we touch, or anything that we talk about today. Reiterate the fact that you should leverage descriptions with everything. And the reason is because you want to, the best way to tune is to not repeat. You don't want to create an impact on your system just because you have something that everybody's trying to access in a slightly different way. So you want to make sure that everybody's leveraging as much as possible the same. When we talk about indicator sources, an indicator source is a master pull that you pull from your database, and then it comes into a PA table that gets stored. We parse that out when we create the indicators. And so if you can minimize the amount you do that master pull of data, and then do the parsing on the indicator level, that is a great way to enhance performance on your system. And so you definitely want to be thinking about minimizing the indicator sources that are hitting the system with the same exact stuff. And the best way to do it is to use those descriptions.
Yeah. And I think another thing too, that should go without saying, is the name, right? Do you have unique names, or are you just calling an indicator source open incidents? Well, okay, if it's just open incidents and it is that, you know, then maybe that's it. But if it needs to go a little bit further and there's something you need to create, you should say that. Help somebody out by, you know, giving it a really good name and description. That goes without saying anywhere inside the platform that it's available.
Exactly, Phil, you're absolutely right. It makes users understand and use what's already created. So we could not say that more, and we'll keep saying that throughout today's session. One of the things that Thomas touched on was open incidents. Like obviously anything open or whatever is part of something that everybody wants to know, and it's part of a key metric that is pushed out there. And one of the things that we're going to touch on right now is using dates, not states, when it comes to using performance analytics. And part of that means that you want to be able to understand what the state of your data was historically when you do those historic data pulls. And the only way to do that is to figure out, okay, on this day, what did I have open? So was it open before today or closed after tomorrow, or any situations like that? We encourage you to use dates so that when you do your historic data pull, it's as accurate as possible. What it does is it goes out and it pulls the sysids of the records that match the criteria on that date. If you use state in your query, it will look at what the state is today. So that's why we encourage the dates, not states. And I don't know if anyone else wants to chime in on that, but I know that's a big thing that's a little bit different than some of this other technology that's out there today.
Yeah, that's just a whole different mindset of writing a query. And that's why it's really important to think about, am I writing this query for the purposes of collecting PA scores, or am I writing this query for the purposes of getting a live pull, a pull of the live data as it sits right at this instant? So that you want to make sure that you really make that distinction.
And you want to think about that for what you have moving forward, because once you pull data and you have collected your scores, it's hard to go back and make changes without re-pulling everything again. So you want to kind of artfully map this out as to what story am I trying to tell, right? We say that with everything when it comes to dashboard development anyways.
Yeah, great points. Mm-hmm. Another thing that I think can get, I don't want to use the words dangerous because I mean, but it could.
Go
you
ahead.
know,
Go ahead.
if you have, I mean, if you have, free field, that can be typed in, description, shorter, whatever. If you create a column or something inside of a table and it's a free form and you can do that, utilizing those inside of sources can get, I know that there's situations where it needs to be done. Maybe there is something that you need to look for very specifically inside of a field. And if you know that, maybe the table is not that big or whatnot, it's not going to hurt you as much. But I think a good rule of thumb is to say to yourself, if it's a free form field and I want to, look for something in that, I don't know, maybe you might want to think about a different way of pulling that information back. I know that there's always situations that you can't avoid, but if you can't avoid, having a condition on a free form string field, we definitely recommend, avoiding that at all possible if you can. Dan, you had something?
Yeah, and that's just kind of the general philosophy too of how reporting about how doing this work in the platform is very different than external types of reporting, because we stress a lot is make sure that your source data is set up correctly for you to be able to run these live reports on it, or to be able to do the grouping or the breakdowns that you need, and make sure that your source data. So if all you're doing is the report end and you have no control over what's in the tables themselves, then you need to go back to your admins and say, hey, I'm running this query that right now the only way I can get my query is by running this field contains this string, and that's taking 45 seconds for that query to run every time. That's a problem. Then you need to go back to your admins and say, is there a way that can we make either a new field that maybe identifies this one specific element? Let's say that it contains a location name in the short description. I've seen that before. Can you do instead where we just add something that puts the location correctly in the record itself, so it can just be a reference field I'm looking up against, as opposed to using the contains? Because you'd be surprised how often we do see that.
Definitely. The next thing is utilizing report sources, which I find to be really great. I think that they're a little bit underused. I think they could be used a whole lot more. And I'll use that same word that I referenced earlier to Tara, is governance, right? I love the fact that a report source can be created that your organization or whatnot has said, this is how we are going to look at our data. This is, whether it be incident, whatever it is, to say, okay, this is what we will say that a closed incident is. This is all the things that have to be there or whatnot. And when you have a report source, and which are generated from creating a report, it'll use that report source and then it'll collect the data. So even though it used a report source inside the source, once it's in the PA scores table, then it's there. Like, Dan was talking about earlier, it's there and you've pulled it. Obviously based on how often you pull your job will determine how up to date the information is. But report sources could be utilized a lot more. There's actually a blog that I created a few years ago that I'll make sure that I put inside of this as well in the community, that gives you a lot of great information on report sources. And Terry, you leaned up, so I'm guessing you had something to say.
I was just going to say, I almost wish that there was a way to force report sources as like the first step for anyone who is ever been in a role where you're a report admin, team lead, in control and responsible of the source of truth, basically. I would almost encourage you to sit down with your admins and figure out a way to force your teams to leverage existing report sources first, instead of writing their own reports. Because when you're responsible for that source of truth, you're able to filter out that noise. You're able to fine tune and customize your queries, even with reporting, to minimize the amount of impact that folks are hitting your system with runaway queries and things that they don't know or understand. Everybody has access to reporting for the most part. And if they don't understand how the data and how it's structured, you kind of get yourself in a situation where wish you could just grab everyone. At least I know when I used to have that role, I want to be like, no, I don't want you to do that.
Don't do that. Yeah,
exactly. And so
I know.
No, I'm sorry. No, I just saying I love it. Use it.
So Jane, great question. I think it's actually, I was going to comment on that exact thing. So Jane's question is there a way to force that reports can only be built using report sources? There is not currently a way to force that. That is something that I know I've put in and others have put in as a feature request. But it's more difficult than it would seem like. But yes, Jane, I agree with that entirely. A way,
I would agree with that 100%. But I
a
wonder if
suggestion I got,
there's a
just to
clearer
say,
way to do it. Oh, sorry.
a suggestion I got from a customer a few months ago was a great idea, and that is to have reports that tell you what reports are using and not using report sources. So at least you have some sort of audit mechanism. Because you can do that. You can create a report that says, show me everything that's using a report source and everything that's not using a report source. So it's not the perfect world that we want to get to with that feature request, but I find it to be. Oh, Jane, I already do that. Excellent. Okay. So, but those are good. I wanted to come back to Phil, and actually, Phil, I set you up so you're allowed to talk if you want to, because you had the comment about the querying using if then else. And I think we could comment on that, but I think I'd like to hear, if you can speak to that in any more detail about what you mean by that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. When a lot of times when you're doing reports or you're setting up queries to run, if whether it's a report source, which I prefer to do, or if you're doing a table, if you do an if then else to get your data to be filtered, it's very consuming on the resources for your system. And it's much better if you restrict it. And I'm drawing a blank right now on the name of the new term to use for if then else. It's a catchphrase and it just went out of my head. But there's a way to query specifically where you restrict it without going through all the records. Because if then else means I want to read every single record in this table and make a determination. If it meets this criteria, then add it. If not, but if you use this new it's not a keyword, it's a function. It's a scripting function that allow you to specify the specific records you want. It pinpoints only those and will only query for those records.
That's going to be a bit more advanced, but it can definitely be useful. And
yeah. And
cool. Thank you.
I can't remember the name of the function. I'm probably needing to remind myself how to do that again. But that's basically what I did once.
I don't off the top of my head either, but yeah. Okay, good. Thank you, Phil.
I'll go back on mute.
Yep. Thanks.
And then the other thing here is, the absolute easiest way to know right out the gate whether or not the results that you have looked for are loading slowly is just use the preview, right? See how long it takes to actually preview that. So I'm sure that all of you are using that, but if you're not, it is really a really quick source to find out, if what you're pulling is going to take long. So that's indicator source. So let's talk about breakdown source here a little bit real quick. So breakdown sources are a really good source when you get to the widget level and the indicator level where you can actually change the results that you are looking at. And it starts at that breakdown source. So a lot of the things that we just talked about will apply directly at the breakdown source as well. And I know, Dan, this is probably one of those things that are near and dear to you.
This is near and dear to my.
I can tell that you're ready to go with.
Sadly, this is near and dear to my heart. Yeah, I've dealt with it, come across this one a lot lately. I mentioned a little bit earlier that indicator sources are really only relevant for performance, at least, only relevant during the data collection process. Breakdown sources are relevant during both the collection process and the widget loading time. So when you're actually loading your dashboard. So the importance of a breakdown source, if you have a dashboard that you're trying to apply a breakdown to, and because I've had a customer that a dashboard loads pretty quickly, 3 or 4 seconds, maybe 7 seconds, the whole dashboard when no breakdowns applied. But as soon as they select a breakdown from the dashboard breakdown at the top of the screen, it suddenly took 45 seconds for some of the widgets to load. And that was significantly based upon the efficiency of the breakdown source itself. So as Thomas said in the last slide about using the preview, if you're having widgets that are loading slow and they're PA indicators, one of the first things that I look at is the breakdown source to see if there's a breakdown source that is running if you just go back to the breakdown source itself, hit preview, and if that breakdown source takes more than 3 or 4 seconds to load, you need to look at ways you can tune that better. So That's what I come across a lot. So that there's more of a more of the when you're going to see this, when this is going to be important to you. So
yeah, and I think that, as we were talking earlier about the indicator sorts, I think, the free form string fields are another one where you want to try
yep.
to avoid them as much as possible whenever you can. And like Dan just said, preview it, right? See how long it takes.
Yeah.
I mean, you can literally not go wrong with that being a great determination on whether or not you've made that breakdown source efficient or not. Another thing to think about too is always try to make sure that you can minimize the number of elements that are going to be returned, because again, it's calling those directly at the dashboard level. When you load that breakdown, it's going to go through and have all of those there. So if you can limit the number of elements that are actually returned, and you can do that with using, like for in this example, user related list condition. Maybe here you're looking at users where active is true, but maybe it's something specific to incidents. You say, okay, I want to see users that have actually had an incident, maybe assigned to them in the last month. So any way that you can, don't forget the related list conditions that you can do, right, which makes everything granular as well.
Yeah, related list conditions have been my best friend, honestly. That's bringing up, and again, I'm a geek. I recognize that. I'm a nerd with this stuff, but that's if you want to do things like I want to have a breakdown of all my CIs. Well, don't do all your CIs. Do a related list condition that says only show me CIs that are that have been on incidents in the last 3 months, or incidents or changes in the last 3 months, or something like that. That can significantly improve by using a related list condition, improve the performance. I also wanted to address the question that Maggie had. So does the breakdown order matter? Like maybe having priority as first breakdown, but assignment group second, because that has thousands, and some customers even have tens of thousands of assignment groups or other types of breakdowns. Generally, the place where the order matters is when you want to auto load a dashboard based upon the breakdown. So if I want to auto load a dashboard and automatically have it apply an assignment group, that's going to be, you're likely going to see some performance issues if you have tens of thousands of performance of assignment groups. So there's some things that it might be a little slower that way. I would recommend not having that load automatically, but otherwise the actual order of the breakdowns themselves really is more of a functionality thing of what are the breakdowns that are going to make more sense for the consumers of your content. What are the breakdowns they're going to look for first? But the order shouldn't make that much difference with performance.
Dan, do you want to keep speaking and talk about dot walking and related lists?
Dot walking, yes. Can you dot walk on a breakdown from related and same with the same performance effect? Okay. So I'm going to take a guess here, Phil, and you can type in if it's not the right answer. But what you're talking about here. So I want to go to I'd say like that configuration item example. I want to do the related list lookup against incidents, let's say, or against tasks in general, just against tasks. And I want to say, just show me CIs that have been on tasks in the last month. Are you then saying that I want to say maybe then dot walk to like the locations of those incidents? Or that that's what you're talking about here, that I want to do condition? Yes. Okay. You can do that in the conditions. Once you get to that first level of there's not, I guess to say, is there's no one straightforward, this is the answer, yes or no. Generally, if you get to the first level of dot walking is usually going to be okay. If I'm dot walking in my related list conditions, I can, but there are exceptions there too. So if it's a really complex lookup field, if it's a string field, things like that, I would generally want to avoid doing any more than just one level of dot walking when we're doing that sort of condition building. But a lot of it is going to be trial and error, unfortunately. So there's no one size fits all answer to that. But
isn't the related list condition theoretically the first dot walk?
Yeah, and that's why I say it's generally, if it's a very simple dot walk to the second level, that is a second one, that's okay. But that's but that's where I wouldn't go any further than that ever. And it's some trial and error even at that first level.
Yeah, just that's where I find, for me, figuring it out using a regular report
Yeah.
is the first way to go.
Phil, more than
Over-
one, need a new query. Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, great.
Like
Okay,
matching
let's see.
CI
So-
name with asset model. Yeah. Okay. Yep. Good example.
Okay. So now that we've created an indicator source, is there anything else that we can do at the actual automated indicator level to make it even faster or tuning perspective? And one of the first things that we talk about is, can you add additional conditions at the indicator level? So maybe you have an indicator source that is that source, and you're not necessarily allowed to edit that indicator source, but you know that at the indicator level you can add one more level to it. Then that's highly recommended. Again, if there's governance around the ones that you're using, or if you don't own it and you don't want to change that indicator source, and you create an automated indicator, add an additional condition right there. And again, that will help with that as well. And then the other thing too is avoid scripts, right? So at all possible, if you can, scripts inside of the conditions, or if you're using a script somewhere else inside of the indicator, avoid those as much as possible. Obviously, there are reasons out there where you may have to use it, but our rule of thumb is always going to be avoid scripts. And we'll talk about that a little bit more here in a little bit, and give you some options of different ways to do some things to avoid the scripts. So Dan, Terry, I don't know if there's anything that you want to speak to here at this level.
I was just going to say, I think you touched on it again, but this is a really good place to use your descriptions. And this is where you want to be more fine tuning. This is where you want to make sure that you are being explicit in what you're looking for. So the indicator source is not where you want to do that. It's the actual automated indicator and the breakdown where you want to be a little bit more prescriptive on what you're pulling, because that's where it's okay. You've already queried the data, you've already pulled it out, and now you're just working from a chunk of data that's already pulled and started in a temporary table. Yeah. And so this is the place for you to go ahead and be a little bit more specific and be very clear with your definitions so that they can be reused.
And I want to piggyback on that very quickly here too. Just a little of the behind the scenes for those who aren't aware. When you run a collection job for performance analytics, the indicator source query is only run one time for that job, even if that same indicator source is used on 15 different indicators. The query itself is only run once. So that's what Tara says. You want to do your fine tuning on the indicator, because what it does first, it runs the indicator source and gets your data set there. So you've already got a limited data set. Then it applies the extra conditions at the indicator level. So there's some real good reason for doing it, for planning it that way.
Thanks for clarifying that, Dan. That's absolutely right.
Not everybody knows that.
Not
I mean,
everybody
they think about that.
That's how it works, but it's a great way to keep your system a little bit more optimized.
Yep.
Absolutely.
From what you can control, right? PA admins can only So these are the things we're being clear about. These are what's within your power to control. So let's do the best we can with it.
Yeah, great. So now let's talk about, you've done everything, right? You've created your indicator source, your automated indicator, your breakdown source, your automated breakdown. And now you've added an indicator to created a widget from it. What should it look like, or not necessarily what should it look like, but how many widgets should you see when the dashboard first loads? Does any of that make a difference? All those different things. So we kind of have some general rules here. And first is 6 is good. Obviously, depending on how much data that you're actually pulling in each one of these widgets, could you have more? Absolutely. That's why we say, tweak up or down from there. If you find that, the first 2 or 3 are loading relatively fast, and maybe that 4th one takes its time, maybe it's an opportunity for you, one, to go back and see, well, what's making that load slower, but do I want that to impact, when somebody's looking at it? So maybe I need to move that further down on the dashboard or something like that. But 6, I think, is a great starting area. It's not set in stone. I think it really just comes down to what you need and how well it's working for you. Listen, you could possibly have 10 that load really, really fast and you want them to pop up on that dashboard right out the gate. That's okay. I mean, it's not going to break if you decide to have 10. We're just trying to give you some sort of guidance on that. And then another thing to think about too is depending on what type of widget that you're actually showing, and again, understanding what Dan was talking about earlier, the data is already there. It's not like you're running it real time. If you were using a report as one of your widgets and maybe it was a list report, you might want to determine how many rows you want to come back, because if it is a table that you're reporting on that has millions of records and you just have not put enough filter conditions in it, do you want to have, how many rows do you want to come back? Although at the PA level, if you use a list widget, you can actually set that there if you choose to. But again, that data is already sitting in a table that it's just accessed and the job is run. So it shouldn't be much impact. But again, maybe you want to look at that, obviously, and that will help you determine on how many that you're going to see. Are you going to have a really long widget that has 25 rows of data, or, maybe you just want to look at the top 5 and then, somebody can kind of go from there. And again, speed of breakdown source query is huge. So when you add a some sort of breakdown to your dashboard, again, going back to what Dan said, is how many results you're going to have there. When you hit that drop down list, how long is it going to take to load all of those? So the more granular that you can make the breakdown when it's actually on the dashboard itself, the easier it's going to be, and really how much time it's going to take to actually see see those results, because it can get very probably annoying. Might be a bad word, but let's just be real. It could get kind of annoying if you have 10,000 breakdown elements that you've chose. Are there situations where you need those? Sure. But if you can avoid that, I would definitely tell you to avoid that. And I had smiles from the both of you, so I know that you are dying to add something to that.
No,
go ahead, Dan.
No, just gonna say kind of just another the little of what's happening in the background. So just keep in mind that when you're loading widgets, PA widgets, when there is a breakdown applied, you are querying against the breakdown source every single time you load that widget. So that's kind of what we mean by that. So that's all I wanted to say on that. So.
And all I was going to add in touching on Phil's question here, Dan and I are actually going to go into much greater detail on this in the next Performance Analytics Academy session on the properly designing a dashboard. But loading widgets on a dashboard kind of ties into that. So I'm going to touch on that for just a second. You need to make sure that your data is telling the right story and you're getting the answers to the questions that you need with the minimum amount of widgets. So I've seen dashboards with 20 or 30 widgets on them that aren't actionable. They're just informational. So you want to think about the order of importance. It's all relative. When you're combining responsive widgets with reports, that's totally fine, as long as they're helping tell that story and the queries themselves have been fine-tuned. So if you are just loading reports on there just to show the list of records, you can get that from the KPI details on a widget on the next down into the next level. So really, you only want to use reports if you need something live and actionable. Like we recommend using reports when you're using Spotlight, right? Because you're looking at things that are happening real time and you need to know exactly what you need to hit, what you need to pull from your queue right away. Otherwise, the list of records that are applicable to your widget are perfectly fine by getting that in the KPI details and minimizing the widget load that you have on a dashboard. And like I said, Dan and I are going to get into this in great detail in a couple of weeks, but it is important to remember that widget load is a thing. And if you have, 20, 30 widgets on a dashboard, anything below the fold, people have to scroll, then they take more time to load. It's just something that, if they're not actionable, if they're not providing value, if they're not contributing to the success of attaining your goals, you might want to think about another tab or just not putting them on there. I mean, no is an answer. What are you going to do with this data? If there's no answer to that, chuck it.
Absolutely. Great point.
Yep.
Dan, you had something you're going to answer that one live?
I was going to answer the question for Maggie. Maggie's question, the question that she asked was, does collecting the breakdown matrix have significant impact on the widget, on the time to load the widget? I'm assuming you're talking about the widget. So pardon me. So generally, the matrix, the breakdown matrix, has more to do with the data collection. What's that overnight data collection? So creating this, populating the scores table, and less to do with loading the widget. Because what the widget's doing is actually just reading the PA scores table, which is already pretty optimized. So when you have the matrix, that generally is not going to make a big difference. Where it does is, again, the same issue of the breakdown sources. If you have a breakdown source you have two breakdown sources, they each have tens of thousands of elements in them, and you're trying to apply both of them at the same time on your widget, that will definitely slow it down. But other than that, just in general, no, it shouldn't make it should not make a big difference on it.
Before I answer Gabriella, because I'm going to answer you, I want to touch on that really quick. I don't know that we talked about, for breakdown sources, really having the conversation on what's valuable, because if you have thousands of breakdowns, that's not valuable. What are you going to do with that? You need your top X. What's the most important? What are you trying to achieve? What are you looking to flush out? Make sure you're fine tuning along those lines, because nobody's going to look through thousands of breakdowns, for some cherry pick for that. The purpose of a dashboard is to surface up where you're inefficient, to figure out where you can fine tune and improve your performance and your processes. And so if you are just bringing everything to the table, it's the same thing as writing a report without a filter condition or indexing every single field. You're not providing the value that a dashboard is supposed to provide, which is letting me know where I need to jump in and take action. Gabriella, you want to count the widgets per tab. So you definitely want to have the minimized amount above the fold, we say. So that's like, if you have to scroll down, then the more work you have to do to hunt and pick for the story that you're trying to pull out, the more complicated it gets. So like I said, Dan and I are going to talk about this a lot, but we will say for this sake, everything that ties to your specific business goals should be on that first page. Top 6, top 4, however you want to do it, as minimal as possible above the fold. So sometimes you can have 3 and then one big one below it, and that still counts as 6, because it would take up like six spots on a grid. I guess that's a good way to pull that out. When you say 6, that's kind of what we mean.
Great, thank you.
Yes, Stephen. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah. Oh, I was just going to say, I was
writing
in there. No, that's fine. That's fine. I was just going to say that for Stephen's question, I think it's a really good question. Are these recommendations the same for classic UI versus the new UI, or next experience, as some of you may know it as? Yes, that is the case. The next experience, it still uses the same backend. Really, the difference is the front end and how it's being displayed to you. So the whole process of indicator sources, breakdown sources, adding additional conditions at the indicator level, and that, all exactly the same.
Yep, great point.
Good question.
Right.
Glad you asked that.
Yep. So looking at a time check, we got a couple more here. So real quick, I want to talk about database views and then also database indexes. So, the purpose of database views, obviously, join multiple tables together to get, an end result that you can actually report on. And, can you apply conditions at the database level of each one of those joins or something like that? If you can, that's definitely recommended as well, to pull the results down or be as specific as possible. So definitely think about that. So here is a database. This is a very generic one. It's the metric. Where did it go? Oh. Are y'all playing with me? No. Okay. No. This is a very generic one, and it's on, using the metric. But here you can see the different tables that are actually accessed down at the bottom in order to pull this information together. And, again, whenever you can, take this same table and then apply, something to the where clause at each one of those joins to even make it more defined, definitely do that as much as possibly can. This is something that, again, only admins can do. So if you don't have the access to create a database view, or if you want to change something up on an existing database view, you're definitely going to have to reach out to your admin for that. But this is a really good source when you need it to combine some data, and then being able to have it report out as one table is something very huge. So Dan, Terry, did you want to add anything to that?
Well, I just want us to talk about as a group Bridget's question. I mean, it definitely depends on the type of join you have. I'm not an expert on database views. I've written them, but that was a long time ago. But I know it depends on if you have an inner join, an outer join, left or right. That determines what kind of data is returned. I don't know if any of you guys can elaborate on that anymore.
Yeah.
I know that might be part of the issue. I don't know that I've ever done a join to the metric instance table.
Yeah, inner join restricts more. Yeah, and it's true. It's only showing the SC. Oh, so I mean, drilling into the records. Okay, it's only showing because with a database view, you do need to what you're specifying at the database view. If you're looking at it from a PA, like if you're looking at an analytics hub, if that's the view you're trying to get to, when you're drilling in, you're seeing just the SC request item columns. If you're working with a PA widget, the indicator source is going to ask you, if the indicator source is a database view, it's going to ask you which table you want to be the primary view for the records for the database view. So in this case, it must be set, I think it defaults to the SC request item tables. So you can change that, and then if you do change that, you'd also have to. I would also recommend changing at the admin level, changing the layout of the columns rather than just customizing for yourself. But that does require an admin to do it. So then you can be much more specific. You can cross over the two tables more easily within the database view.
Perfect.
So, yeah.
All right, great. The question about, are we going to cover the tuning tips for reports as well? Actually, I'm going to paste in, because like I said, we did that in November of last year. So I'll paste in that link there so you can actually get to that. And I'll make sure that it's also inside of the community blog for this as well. So the next thing we'll talk about is database index, some tips here. So create an index to order results for ease of querying. I kind of have always used the adage, it's like the old phone books. I know that they don't get delivered to the doors anymore. I remember that as a child when our phone book would always get dropped off on the porch or something like that. If you could imagine looking through a phone book with no order, no alphabetical order, and just be like, I need to find so-and-so. Well, I mean, when you search through or when indexes or databases are out there, or tables or even whatnot are out there, and they're kind of like that, thinking about it, some are ordered by dates and things of that sort. But if you were looking at a name field, I mean, it could be anything, right? So when you're actually creating an index that looks at that, so this is kind of what it would look like. So if you notice here, we have numbers and they're kind of all over the place. But if you create an index, let's say on the name, then now we've ordered them. So now that means that when we're actually querying that, it's so much easier right out the gate to look for something because it's going to go alphabetical. So that is one of the great highlights of actually doing indexes on things. And then the next thing is you can actually also create an index on the number. Now, caveat, going back to what Tara said early, that doesn't mean you need to create an index on every column inside of a table, because not all indexes are useful, and the more indexes that you have could actually make things even worse for you. So there are so many that are out of the box, that just come out of the box, that we as ServiceNow have said this makes sense to have an index. They're out of the box. And again, references, anything that's a reference is already has an index that attached to it. But if there's something that that you need, and you've verified that it's not there, and that it's not going to be a huge impact because it's not the 19th or 20th index on a table, then maybe you want to, and those are just ambiguous numbers, but maybe you just want to reach out to your admin and say, hey, can we look at maybe adding this index? Because there are some that could be added. I don't think that we thought of them all. There could be, especially if you created a new table, maybe there's a table that you created as an organization which means none of the out of the box indexes would potentially work on that anyway. Maybe you need to look at doing that as well. But this is something that if you can, if it's being utilized, and that's great, but if there's more that you need to add, then definitely go for that as well. Dan, you had something?
I was just going to adding on to what Phil just made a comment, and I was just going to put it I was just going to type it in here, so I don't have anything else to add to that topic.
Yeah, and I think it's a bullet, right? Because it kind of goes to what his question is. So, when there are many indexes on the table and the database decides which index, is there a way to force it? There is, but you want to reach out to support that to actually help you with that. That is not something that just can be done on the fly. I know that our support team would definitely help you do that. Sometimes, what does that say? Sometimes the best index is combined indexes because two fields are most often queried together. Absolutely, great point. I mean, these are great points. Listen, one of the things that we always say, especially as it relates to the community, is there are some really knowledgeable people as customers, and these are all great points that everybody is adding, and it's probably through trial and error, through experience, which is always the best way to really sort of figure this thing out. So again, indexes are huge. There's a lot that are already out there out of the box. Again, reference fields already have them on there, but if you need more, talk to your admin about getting those created. In filtering conditions, we've talked about this at every level at this point, right? At the indicator source, the breakdown source, the indicator level. If you can use filtering, use the filtering. That's what it's there for. One of the ones that I think that is probably almost the best one to use is Active True, right? I mean, that really filters down a lot of information if you would just kind of use that. And again, avoid the string fields, avoid scripts where you can inside of the filter conditions. And of course, it should be dates, not states. That's backwards. That's a typo there. Remember that as you're doing.
States. It is dates, not states.
Yeah, I had it backwards. Yeah.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Here we go again.
The longtime customer,
the man behind the curtain, right? So it's dates, not states.
Yeah.
Our longtime customers, I'm sure, are laughing.
We're not going to spend a whole lot of time on scripting because we don't want you to script, right? So one of the things that we would definitely, recommend is that avoid using scripts whenever you can. Now, there's probably some scripts that are out there, but there's other ways of doing it. We had a really great session by our own Adam Stout, and here's the link to that. I would definitely recommend going and watching this, especially if scripting is something that's being done heavily within your organization, or even if you just want to kind of get an idea of how to avoid doing that in the future when something pops up. Go take a look at this Academy session. It was really great, really good information. Adam is very staunch about no scripts. Yeah. And I think when he created this, he created that definitely with in mind. You had something, Tara?
Yeah, I was just going to say, there obviously are caveats to our lines, right? You're going to have to cross them at some point in time. If you have to use a script, you find yourself in a situation where you need to use one, refer to the release notes as you continue to upgrade, because we do take into account some things that you may have needed a script for that we may have built into the product and made an enhancement. So often we don't think about going back and looking at what we scripted and undoing it, but that should be part of your tuning at every release, is looking to see where you can remove a script because it's been built into the product. Related
list conditions is a great example of that, actually.
It will be in the deck, Lou, right? Where they can find that.
It'll be there. I'll post it. I'll go ahead and post it now into the Q&A, but it will be in the on the actually community blog as well. But there it is. So So we answered a lot of questions during the whole thing. I think we have one more. How to filter reports twice on a dashboard. Make one selection first to filter reports, and then select a different filter to add a second layer of filtering. So I think we're talking about, interactive filters. If you want to put a filter on a dashboard, you can do that. And, you can make an interactive filter act as a breakdown. So you could kind of, use them both there. But, if you have cascading filters, you can, select one and then select another. And there's a really great Academy session that we did on cascading filters as well. And I'll make sure that we add that as well. So let's see.
And then Stephen asked a question about scripting. There were 3 out of the box approved scripts. Anything that absolutely. We recognize those are time tested and approved for sure. But I will always continue to advise you to check our release notes and see if we've gotten away from that in any way, shape, or form. We haven't on those ones for sure. But you know, never know what the future may bring. So just keep checking that stuff. You know that already, Stephen.
Yeah. And we are actually right at the top of the hour. So just so we don't impose on people's times, I'm going to go ahead and finish this up. If there's a question that came in that we didn't get to, I'll definitely make sure that we answer that inside of the community event. So just to close out, thank you, Dan. Thank you, Tara. I think this was great, just having a conversation about these things. And, you know, experience goes a long ways. And we obviously have some as well as the customers that answered questions as well. So thank you for that. So make sure that obviously everyone here, check out our community. There's a lot of great information that's there. Check that out. Obviously, you know, the Platform Analytics community page, check that there for previous and upcoming sessions. And they're there by year. So you can, and I think we have 4 years of those. So there's a lot of good information. Check out our pro tips. Pro tips are actually very similar to what we just did today, where we're just kind of just talking to you about things. And these are really quick 5-6 minute videos, 4, 5, 6 minute videos that you can think about in your journey from the beginning and things to think about. So check those out as well. Make sure that you're always looking at Now Learning. There's some really great learning that's out there as it relates to analytics. Here, I've just put in analytics, and there's tons of things that came back. So make sure that you're utilizing that. PA Advanced is now an on-demand course. So if that's something that you need, definitely check that out as well. Here is a lot more academies that we have that are all under the umbrella that we are as well. So check those out as well, and really great content there. And one thing that I want to make sure I spend a minute here, give us some feedback, right? If you can scan this now, it will be in the PDF, will be the slide deck, and go and give us your thoughts on, you know, the Academy and the community. We want some feedback on the community is new. So we're trying to collect some information on that. So please feel free to do that as well. And in 2 weeks, like Dan and Tara have alluded to, they will be doing dashboard design strategies, which I'm really excited about. I've created dashboards for years, but I'd be really curious to see if I was doing some things wrong, which I think I have been. So it'll be good to hear from the both of them.
I'd be happy to tell you if you are. Just kidding.
That's okay. But yeah, so in a couple weeks, come back and join us for that, which I think will be a really great. And I think it may be even the same sort of style a little bit, you know, just some conversation around great ideas along with some slides and some bullets and things of that sort. So with that, thank you. Sorry, we have went over 2 minutes. Like I said, this will be out there later on in the community. Dan and Tara and everybody who joined, thank you very much. And we'll see you in a couple weeks.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.